We have two brands of LVP that we need to replace, so we are on the hunt for new LVP flooring, but we've had some bad experiences so far, and we're hoping to avoid repeating the same issues. If you want a more detailed explanation as to why we have two different brands of LVP that both need to be replaced, then you can see the blog that I'll post the link to in the description. The first is Coretec Berlin Pine that you can see in the background. The good is that they do have beautiful, realistic looking prints with less obvious repeats. And the embossing is also nice and subtle and smooth. But the issues, we did have an issue with the bevel paint coming off and the corners peeling. And inspector did say that that is defective. And so they reimbursed us. But we also had the problem that people complain about with LVP. About it looking hazy and with footprints on it and not being able to clean it very well, even though we only ever used approved cleaning products and tools. And the worst problem is that it tears apart our clothes and skin. And the other one is Cali Bamboo North Shore Oak. And that one we haven't had any of the same issues that we did with the Coretec Berlin Pine. The only issue that we have with that is that the pattern repeats are really bad on what we have. They have since said that they fixed the pattern repeat issue, but we learned that all they did was use some reversals, and that was it. So we're not really confident that that's going to look any better. This video is mostly about the closed shredding issue with the Coretec floors and with other LVP flooring samples that also have the same kind of matte finish that our Coretec floors have. This was definitely the worst aspect about having the Coretec floor, and we could have never predicted that this was going to be an issue to look out for, that our floors would tear apart our clothes and sometimes skin. So we're hoping that we can raise awareness with manufacturers of these floors, suppliers, installers, and obviously consumers like us that might care about this problem. When we were first looking for LVP over a year ago, the matte finish on the Berlin Pine was really unique. That was actually the only sample that we had that had that kind of finish. So I doubt that this is an issue for people with LVP that is maybe even older than 6 months. But now it seems from the samples that we're getting in that everybody is using this matte finish now, and I'm guessing they're totally unaware that it's so abrasive because it doesn't feel rough. It feels smooth, but in like an odd way, which is why we are now having such a hard time finding replacement LVP because that matte finish is just everywhere. According to both companies, both Coretec and Cali Bamboo, both of these floors have the same UV acrylic top coat. So it's not a difference in the composition of their top coat. Neither report having aluminum oxide or ceramic bead coatings. And despite having more pronounced embossing, the Cali Bamboo floors aren't the ones that are tearing up our clothes. The obvious difference between the two is that the Coretec Berlin Pine has, as I said, has this very matte finish that feels smooth, but it's like touching a smoothly sanded wooden spoon, like almost like smoothly sanded raw wood, whereas the Cali Bamboo North Shore Oak has a slicker feeling, if you can feel in between the embossing. Those floors aren't actually slippery at all, so it's not true that you have to have this ultra matte finish to not have slick floors. So we've determined after a lot of testing that any LVP flooring that has the same kind of matte finish as our Coretec Berlin Pine tears apart clothes pretty bad. And one manufacturer from a totally different brand that was just answering a question of mine online did give us a clue as to why the matte finish might be doing this. Apparently, the nap of the roller used before curing the floors determines how matte the finish is, no matter what the top coat is made of. So the greater and higher the peaks that are left in the finish from the roller, the more matte the finish is. And we think that those peaks are to blame. We'll show you our knee tests on our floors and also on many of the samples that we have that we've recently gotten. We have, I think, 17 samples so far. Probably won't show all 17 in the video, but just to give you an idea of how to test your own floors and also how to test samples of flooring that you're considering purchasing. I definitely recommend doing this test before you purchase LVP. We're also hoping that if manufacturers see this, they will stop using this kind of finish. It really does not appear to be necessary for scratch resistance or durability as evidenced by our Cali Bamboo floors because they are doing fine. It's really terrible to live on floors that tear up clothes and sometimes even skin, especially if you have kids and they are on the floor and you are on the floor with them all day long. I even had to apologize to a friend that had her little girl over one day that was playing on our floor, And she came in, her pants were fine. She left with holes in her pants because of our floors. So do the tests, and please do let us know any manufacturers if you have flooring that doesn't have this issue after you've done the tests, then please let us know because we still are really, really wanting to replace our floors and don't have a good option for LVP right now because of that. If in the end we have to choose between repeats or tearing our clothes, we're going to choose repeats from Cali Bamboo because the clothes tearing thing, it sucks. So, and also, if you find that your floors are doing this or that the samples that you're testing are doing this, please let your manufacturers know. Please let your dealers know. Please let them know so that they realize that this is an issue and they stop doing it because it's definitely possible to have floors that don't tear apart your clothes. So let's do that. So we'll get to the testing. Thank you.
So this is our Coretec Berlin Pine floor. You can see that the embossing is really not very pronounced. It's very subtle and it's very smooth to the touch, but it does have this matte finish that feels like touching like a wooden spoon, like a smoothly sanded wooden spoon. So here is a patch of my pants that hasn't been torn up yet. And I'll just show what it would be like if you just get down one time on the floor and get back up. You can see that it starts as a little white patch, and if you're on the floor all day long playing with the kids and getting up and getting down and getting up and getting down, it really actually doesn't take very long, and especially if you're the kids that are on the floor, a hole will happen pretty quickly. So you can see there that it has, oh yeah, it totally tore that apart. So it happens fast.
Yep.
Okay, so this is our Cali Bamboo North Shore Oak, and the embossing is actually rougher on this floor than it is on the Coretec Berlin Pine, but if you can feel in between the embossing, then it feels smoother, like, well, it feels like almost not slicker. It isn't a slick floor, but the mat itself is not, I mean, the finish itself is not matte. It's more like touching a stainless steel spoon than touching like a wooden spoon. So I'm starting out with another patch on my pants, and this is what it would be like just getting up and getting down once or a couple of times during the day. Not too bad. Definitely not as bad as the Berlin Pine. And then if I do it over and over and over again and over and over and over again, it's maybe rubbed the fabric some, but it's still just obviously not nearly as bad as the Berlin Pine. There's no holes. There's no like fabric that's coming off. Okay, so we have 5 Flooret samples here, and we've washed the surface of them and dried them off. So what you're looking for, it's the first sign of fabric damage is just kind of whitish patches. So this is just one go across the board and that, and it's going to be the same for all of these. There.
Yep.
That one was really bad. That one almost tore a hole just in that one pass. And that is like the fabric that's kind of peeling up. So we are testing Pergo Extreme here. And that's what it does. It makes these kind of like whitish patches where it's damaging the fabric. You can see that the fabric is starting to come off. And eventually those white patches turn into holes like this. Okay, so another patch that is of pants that are still okay. Can't pull any fabric off of it. Okay, let's try these little Karndean samples. There it is. This one is testing Armstrong, their Empower line. This one is Viking Hickory Flaxen Field. And you can see that if I try to, there's no fabric to pull off of there. Okay, so let's test this one. You can pretty much hear that it's gonna do it.
Gritty.
It doesn't feel gritty is the thing. You can tell how it feels matte. It does feel different than our non-matte floors, but it doesn't feel rough, but it just is. Okay, there it is. So they definitely do it too. And here is some of the fabric that's coming off. This one is Mannington Adura Southern Oak Natural. It is actually hard for me to tell what the finish is because the embossing is so extreme all over it, which I mean, it's very realistic and pretty. But even if the finish isn't that raw wood kind of matte finish, the embossing is probably gonna tear apart because it's really, really, really rough. So I think that's it.
It's breaking down the fabric.
Yeah, it's not as extreme as those like huge white patches, but and I think that's because it's not really the finish. It's that one I think is the embossing because it's so rough. But yeah, it is pulling up the fabric. Okay, this is actually an old sample of Coretec before, like over like a year and a half ago, when before everything was is now that matte finish. It's obviously not glossy, but you can definitely feel that it's like a slicker feel to it. Not like slippery, but just a slicker feel compared to that matte raw wood feel. So let me try another patch here and see if this old finish that's not so matte does it. Definitely not leaving any white patches. I don't know if any fabric got pulled up. It's not super obvious if it did. Definitely less if it's doing anything. Okay, so now we're testing our hardwood floors that have a slick finish, like actually slick finish. Slide around on your socks. There isn't really anything that I can scratch off. No, obviously white patch. Okay, so this is the wet paper towel test. Just have a wet paper towel. You're gonna see this easier if you have darker paint on your bevels. So you just kind of get in there and rub it back and forth. And if you see a dark line or a line that's the color of your paint, then that's probably not something you're gonna want to go with, because if you mop it over and over and over again, eventually that paint is gonna start to wear away and chip away. Not great.